What is up, my Lorcana Goons? Welcome back to the Lorcana Goons channel. You are watching the Quest with a Guest podcast. Today, our guest is going to be Shane Downey, a local Southern California Lorcana Goon who went back-to-back getting first place at the Star City GamesCon Vegas event on Saturday's 5K and Sunday's 1K, and even got top 4 at the 2K on Friday. So we're going to pick Shane's brain a little bit about his meta choices, what he thinks of the format, and overall the future of Lorcana. So sit back, relax, and stay tuned to Lorcana Goons. What is up, Lorcana Goons? Welcome back to Quest with a Guest. Our guest today is going to be none other than Shane Downey. Shane Downey, welcome to our podcast. My co-host today is Zach Stone. If you don't know who Shane Downey is, you're going to start seeing him a lot in the future of the Lorcana card game. He just went back-to-back victories, getting first place at the SCG Con 5K and 1K Saturday and Sunday. So if you have SCG Con followed on Twitter, then you saw this man's face holding that beautiful 5K trophy. I just want to say congrats, Shane, man. How you doing today?
Thank you. Yeah, it was obviously a great weekend. I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Nice, man. So getting first place back-to-back at some events where you're walking away with some good prizing. You know, you're from Southern California, so you traveled to Las Vegas for this event. Can you tell me a little bit about the weekend, I guess, and tell me just about your overall experience, how you're feeling today?
Yeah, sure thing. So I have a little bit of history with Star City Games back in my Magic days, and I say Magic days as if they've passed, but I still do play quite a bit of competitive Magic as well. But Star City Games would tour all around the country and would visit the West Coast, and at some point they kind of decided to stop visiting the West Coast for whatever reason, likely financial reasons, of course, because they are an East Coast-based company. So as soon as they announced that they were coming to Las Vegas, I was actually pretty excited because they haven't been out here in quite some time. So I kind of marked it on the calendar, and I don't remember what came first, but I think SCG came first, and then of course there was the announcement of the Lorcana challenges, and it overlapped with Chicago. So I had to make a decision there, but ultimately I decided to go a little local. Now it was traveling, about a 4-hour drive from Southern California to Vegas, but still it was worth it in the end. Obviously, I'm pretty happy with the way things turned out.
Nice, yeah, man. It did get announced before the Lorcana Challenge. I do remember being pretty hyped to see an SCG Con on the West Coast. So I don't really have experience with Star City Games. To me, Star City Games was something that I had heard of from getting into Lorcana, because I would see all these events happening on like the Midwest and the East Coast, and I'd be like, how come none of these places are ever near California or nothing? So I did see the
Yeah.
Vegas one. I did want to go, and it did overlap with Chicago. The reason I didn't go personally was because the Atlanta event was kind of so close by, and I kind of feel like I couldn't take that much time off of work. But we did have a couple friends in our mutual friend group that did win, and whatnot. So glad to see that somebody was able to bring it home. Somebody who we played in tournaments together and whatnot. So overall, like, what was the tournament setting like? Was it very competitive at the Star City Games Con? For someone who hasn't been to SCG Con, like, what could you expect?
Yeah, so there were events Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I actually finished in the top four of the Friday event as well. So definitely was a good weekend through and through. But it's just a great event overall, regardless of which game you play. Now, maybe all games are represented, but there were several games represented at the event. And honestly, like I said, I do play Magic. I had to make a conscious decision to kind of, push that to the side and play Lorcana. And some of my friends give me a little bit of a hard time because, locally at least, I'm still kind of navigating a lot of the local players here and you know, meeting some people in the scene because a lot of my experience comes from Magic, and at least my close friend group, none of them have really transitioned over to Lorcana like I have. But I traveled with a couple close friends of mine. They were more on the Magic side of things, but that allowed me to have my way with the Lorcana side of things. But it was a very professionally ran event. There's a good amount of judging staff. If you ever have any questions, they're there for you. I think all levels of competitiveness is welcome. It is technically a competitive level event, so you're expected to play at a certain standard, but nonetheless, if you are a beginner and there's an SCG con near you, don't be intimidated by any means, and definitely check it out.
Dang, so top four also in the Friday one. Man, you're you just go back to back to back is what it is. And I struggle getting top four at locals sometimes. That's really nice
Oh,
to
I
see.
do too. This doesn't happen every time, trust me.
Okay, yeah. Well, it feels like it does. It sounds like it does because since I started playing Lorcana, and I've been playing since the first chapter, I've heard your name locally as like a monster in the community, and I say that with grace because like I want to say you played at Top Choice Gaming before, right? Like they're
I
in
have,
Cologne,
yes.
yeah. So I'm pretty sure I've seen you there, like in the first chapter time. So, but I'm more from like LA Long Beach area, so we didn't really cross paths. But the second time we had a cross paths was at the Tier One Games 1K, I believe. And you and I were both like undefeated towards like one of the last rounds of Swiss, and I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, there's one Emerald Steel player in this room, and he's just like demolishing people. And I'd seen your name on the Facebook groups, and people were like, oh, it's Shane Downey, like Shane Downey's here, Shane Downey's here, and it was like a thing. And then the first thing he's like, oh, do you want to split? And I was like, oh, cool, of course I want to split. What the heck? Because we were in the Swiss round, so we against a top cut, and Zach
Oh, intentionally draw, yeah.
yeah, there you go. Intentionally draw. Intentionally draw. It's just, and that's the thing. IDs are new to me. I've never played a game with IDs. So in Yu-Gi-Oh, you don't ID, which is a game that we come from. But Zach reminded me today
Mhm.
that because Zach was also in the top eight. Zach was also in the top eight for that
I
one
do
game.
remember that one.
Yeah, so we were both in the top.
Yeah.
All three of us were in the top eight, and you were when the guy asked us, the owner asked us, okay, do you guys want to play it out? Or do you guys want to split? All of us said, okay, let's all split, but you were the only person that said, nah, let's play it out. And, you just gotta
Yeah,
respect it.
someone's got to be the bad guy sometimes, you know. I don't relish in that role, but I
I
felt pretty
I
confident
think
and
it's
wanted to play for a little more.
I think it's funny because there was another tournament I recently played where the host said, "All right, guys, I can have you guys just raise your hand if you want to split, or if there's somebody that says they want to just write on a piece of paper their decision, everyone just hands me that piece of paper, and then I will tell you guys if it's a unanimous split or if you guys have to play." So the bad guy burden isn't placed on somebody if they don't want to announce it, but.
Uh,
I not only do I remember you, yeah, the reason why we played is the unanimous decision was not something you wanted to do. Kevin and I lost our top eights, and when it got to top four, I want to say you were pressured into doing it because you said, "Well, I think I'm the only one that doesn't want to, but since you guys do, we'll take it."
you know what? Sometimes life and timing comes into play, and I don't know that I would have remembered this, but I'm thinking about it now. That was towards the end of the NFL season, and the Cowboys were playing, and that's my team, and I was like, you know what? I'll split, and I think that location's right next to a bowling
Yeah,
alley.
yeah.
When I went next door and watched the game, so
I'm dead.
I remember that
What
game.
a way to end the night. I like that night. And that was a good night. And nothing but respect to you for wanting to play it out. We're there to play the card game at the end of the day. We're not
of
there.
course,
We're not there to
absolutely.
make fancy splits. We're not there. We're there to play the card game. So nothing but respect, man. And yeah, man. I think that type of attitude or that type of boldness, confidence, goes a long way. I know there's some people who they start feeling like, oh, I just want to split. I want to get it over with. Like why at the tournament then? That's how I feel. Like why are you at the tournament if you're afraid to play all your 9 rounds? But don't get me wrong. If I get to that 8th round at a Lorcana challenge and I can intentionally draw, I'm gonna take that intentional draw.
Yeah, I think every situation is different. I've certainly been on the other side of the coin where I've been in top eights, with the other game and been interested in splitting, and somebody said no, and that's their prerogative. You just gotta play it out. And I've been in situations where I've declined. In fact, on Friday, each in top eight they do a blind ballot. I declined. I actually publicly declined that one because I don't want to waste anyone's time. But in top four, I declined again, and I would have accepted in the finals, and I lost. So I lost money by declining the split, and that's okay. That's the risk that you take.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. But but then you win some, you lose some, and I think that's the importance of playing card games. That you have to learn how to lose. You know what I mean? What about in your opinion? Like,
Yes.
what are some like tips for people who want to get really into that competitive side of card gaming? I guess. And then on top of that, like, what are tips that you've learned from Magic the Gathering that you can apply to Lorcana? Since you said you've been playing Magic for how many years?
A very long time.
Okay.
I think I started when I was about 12 years old, and now I'm nearing 40. I'm 38. Don't tell anyone. But not that I've played competitively that entire time by any means. When you're young, you generally start pretty casual. There were several years where I didn't play at all. It's been off and on throughout my life. But the one thing that's great about TCGs in general, and I'm sure people playing Lorcana now will experience this, is I've relocated a couple times in my life. I've lived in 4 states, and you can always find that local game store, and you can always meet new people that way. So for any younger people listening to this that maybe just started playing Lorcana, maybe they're going to college soon, something like that, there's a sense of community regardless of which game you play, and it can contribute to relationships that can last a lifetime, truly. And circling back to your question, I mean, there's so many things that can translate from really any card game into Lorcana. Uh, but I think just learning the basic fundamentals. If you do see someone at your local store winning consistently, I mean, sure, you don't want to badger them, but just, you can ask them for advice. Most people are going to be friendly to you. I can't guarantee you that everyone will be. But I think for Locana specifically, the mulligan rule is so unique that I think you can learn so much by just asking someone who's a quote unquote expert on a deck what they're choosing in the mulligan. What cards are they always keeping? What cards are they always sending back? That's something that I think can just increase your win rate significantly if you just kind of figure out those heuristics of a certain type of deck. That's my personal take on Lorcana. Obviously, different games require different skills, but that was one thing when I first started playing Lorcana. It was like, okay, I think if you master this part of the game, it will go a long way in increasing or reducing your variance, I should say.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Shane. I do want to kind of come back to, you did bring up community, and that's definitely a huge part about how I got into TCGs. If you didn't know, Shane, I played Yu-Gi-Oh for 14 years, and I'm phasing myself out, going more into Lorcana seriously. And that was the biggest part. Was I definitely found a sense of community, and being at a young age, and during my time, there was a lot more of a I would say hasting, going on. Like people were or hazing going on. Generally, people would actually like to push your buttons, I would say, in a card game. Did you ever feel like any of your buttons were ever pushed ever, getting into a community, or I guess how has your experience been in Lorcana so far?
I guess I've been pretty fortunate. I haven't really had too many bad experiences with any players, and I hope they can say the same about me, whoever's played me locally. So it's always, when you're a competitive player and you think you're pretty good at a game, and you go to your local card store and you're playing someone that's perhaps a little less experienced. There's a delicate balance there because you want to win, but you want to make sure that they're having a good time as well. Now, when there's actual stakes on the line, that kind of changes things a little bit. So, if you're playing at something like a Lorcana challenge, uh, you definitely want to make sure that things are by the book. Um, but yeah, I haven't experienced anything like what you described with hazing or anything like that. I think all the stores I've played at locally have been very welcoming.
I want to get to know players outside of the game. So Shane, just also tell us a little bit what you do. What some of your favorite hobbies are, or what are you into outside of TCGs?
Sure thing. I mean, sometimes I think I have too many interests because there's only so much time in the day, and something has to go to the side. I'm dedicating all this time to Lorcana now. As I mentioned, card game player since a young age. Uh, I'll admit I hit the poker room a little bit after those wins in Vegas. Had some success there as well. That doesn't always happen, trust me.
Nice.
As long as you
But
gamble responsibly.
a very casual poker player. I have a background actually in sports broadcasting, so I'm definitely interested in sports. And if anyone's listening, I'd love to transition into maybe some Lorcana broadcasting. So throwing that out there. But I worked in minor league baseball for a few years, actually for the team locally here in San Bernardino, and then later for a team in Washington. So definitely a sports fan. I play, fantasy sports. So, and when I'm dedicated to that, I'm really competitive with that as well. I know a lot of people play things like fantasy football very casually, but if I'm in it, I'm in it to win it. So, uh, and then video games, I have actually pretty extensive retro video game collection. I grew up with things like, the original NES, being born in '85, and the Sega Genesis. So at some point, I know a lot of people go through this. You lose all those childhood items, and then you acquire some adult money, and you reacquire a lot of those things. So uh, I don't have a whole lot of time to play them, but I do have all the old games I had as a kid as well. So when opportunity presents itself, I like to play video games as well.
Nice. I am a gamer at heart for the old school as well. I may not look it, but I definitely appreciate the NES, the SNES. That's really cool. I mean, the sports stuff doesn't surprise me considering how competitive we all are. Like, I'm not like the biggest sports fan, but you're saying you work in sports as well. Like, do you think your like love for competition translates into TCGs as well, like in a healthy way?
Yeah, so I don't work in sports currently, unfortunately. I do have a day job. I don't necessarily want to mention the company, but just in analytics currently, and I've worked a little bit in training, just training internal employees, and I honestly think some skills from broadcasting kind of translates to that because you're essentially presenting and going through things. Um, but but yeah, as a kid, I wasn't very athletic. I played little league and I tried out for the basketball team and did various things, but for whatever reason, it didn't really work out for me. But I did always have some amount of a competitive nature. And then my brother, who actually, we have different dads, so a little bit different genetics. He's a little bit taller, a little bit more athletic, and he was the high school quarterback, and he had a ton of athletic success growing up. And meanwhile, I'm, broadcasting. I did a lot of broadcasting of high school football as well. So I was always involved in sports, maybe in the background a little bit, doing some sports journalism as well. But yeah, there's always been a competitive nature that I maybe didn't have the skills for athletically, but you can always translate that to other things. And unfortunately, in the case of card games, doesn't require a lot of athletic prowess.
Hey, no, that makes sense. On the topic of transitioning to card, other things from card games to TCGs, any things that you can take away from Magic the Gathering that you can apply to Lorcana that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think Magic, at least in its current state, obviously Lorcana is very much in its infancy. Uh, Magic is certainly a more complex game. So it generally, it took me a long time to get to a level where I could even consider playing on a professional level in Magic. And I haven't had a lot of success on the professional level of Magic. I've had enough success to, qualify for a few big events and play in those big events. But unfortunately, not a lot of wins, and it's easy to be humbled when you play at higher levels. I know there's probably a lot of people listening to this that Atlanta or Chicago were their first big events, or even the European event, of course, where maybe they're the best player at their local store, but once they went to that bigger event, they realized that there's some stiff competition. But as far as Magic, I think just learning the fundamentals of, figuring out what your deck does. If you're playing in a constructed tournament, now, I'll be honest, I prefer limited in Magic, which is a whole nother conversation. But if you're going to a big event with a constructed deck, which is all we've seen thus far for Lorcana, figure out what your deck does. And this kind of ties into the mulligan conversation. Like, what in a perfect scenario, what do you want to be doing on turns one, two, three, four? And what does that hand look like? And try to sculpt it and get the reps in to be able to figure out what that is. Because if you're going to a website looking at the finalists, whether it's SCG Vegas or Chicago, Atlanta, etc., and you just pick up a deck, I've heard this, not to pick anyone, but I've heard people copy a deck list, go to a local store, not do well, and I've literally heard people say, "This deck sucks. That person must have gotten very lucky." And I just kind of rolled my eyes a little bit, like, that person put in the time to become an expert in that deck. You're learning it. You just picked it up, right? You don't have that expertise. So I think the biggest thing in this whether you're playing Magic or Lorcana or any card game, is practicing. And then if you're not succeeding, figure out why. Because sure, there's variance in card games, But ultimately, if you play over and over and over and over again and the results aren't changing and you're seeing other people have success, well, chances are you're doing something differently, and just try to figure out what that is.
Yeah, I really like that take on it. I definitely think it's really important to understand if you're doing something differently than the opponent. I've heard that too. The whole like the whole net decking situation, which is perfectly fine to look at someone's deck list and get some inspiration, copy it, try it out at locals, but to flat out say they must have gotten lucky or to don't put any responsibility on yourself for those losses. Sometimes we quest with cards when we shouldn't, and it'll cost us the game. And some people don't want to take responsibility for those things, or maybe you mulligan incorrectly, or maybe like I feel like every time I lose, I really try and remember that match, which is why I personally love things like Pixelborn, where you can record your games, but another conversation. But always try to remember the match. I always try to think like, where did I mess up? Did I accidentally ink something I shouldn't have? Did I accidentally swing with a character when I should have kept it there instead? Was I being too greedy? Was I not being greedy enough? I always try to add, and then there are those games that are unwinnable, right? And
Oh,
you have to
absolutely.
understand you have to understand how that works. But going back to the mulligan thing, I know I want to bring
Yeah,
up
go ahead.
your deck list here. So you ended up playing Ruby Sapphire for all three events, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, correct?
That's correct. I played the exact same deck list all 3 days. I figured why fix something that isn't broken. And you mentioned net decking. I didn't have a lot of time to practice with Set 4 at all. So I was in Atlanta, which of course Set 4 was out, and lots of people were playing it, but we played Set 3. And then the following week, I actually played in the Magic Regional Championships, which was in Dallas. So I traveled directly from Atlanta to Texas because I have a family member there. I was able to stay there throughout the week.
Nice.
Uh, Played in that Magic event, did not do well at all. Trust me, it's very difficult to keep up with 2 games.
Hmm.
Um, and then I knew Vegas was the following week, so I had to go home, catch up on work, and didn't have a whole lot of. I maybe played a dozen Pixelborn games, something like that, with Step 4. So I was pretty inexperienced going into the weekend. So you mentioned net decking. I'm not a deck builder. I can take something existing and maybe iterate on it a little bit in my experience. But I did net deck for this event.
Hmm.
Uh, there's 2 players in particular that I would want to give credit to. I believe it's pronounced Siler. If you're in some Lorcana discords, you've
Yeah,
probably seen him.
he's in the Goons
Uh,
Discord too, actually.
Perfect. Yeah, he's a big blue-red guy. And then Moyen, well, has had a lot of success with blue-red, and they were both posting lists, and uh, they ended up in a very similar spot. So I just went with that, and obviously worked out well for the weekend. Maybe later in the interview, I can talk about maybe some changes I'd consider. But if you want to talk about the mulligan now, let's go for it.
Yeah. So in general, like, what is your perfect mulligan for Ruby Sapphire? I guess the way it's looking right now in set four, obviously you want to see Popsicle, you want to see your one jump aheads, but like, why? Like, why are you trying to see these cards?
Absolutely. I think one jump ahead is the most important card to have in your opening hand. Now, all of this is context dependent, um, and whether you know what your opponent is playing, that's going to change your mulligan decisions slightly. But there's basically no scenario where if I have a one jump ahead in my opening 7, am I sending it back? Now, if there's 2, that becomes a little more intricate. If there's 2 one jump aheads and I'm on the draw against a deck that has Ursula, I'm going to keep both of them because if they play Ursula on turn 2, I'm still going to have the opportunity to cast my one jump ahead. And the reason one jump ahead is so important, because in truth, the most powerful card in the deck is Harem Flabbersham. And being able to cast that a turn early is huge, and that ties into having Popsicle on turn 1. So, if you're fanning out your opening 7 and you see those 3 cards, that is an excellent start. You do not want to send those 3 cards back. Those are the 3 key cards that you generally do want to keep when focusing on your mulligan decisions. One topic that I actually discussed with some blue-red players earlier is develop your brain. Do you keep this? Do you not? And that's actually a pretty hot topic with some differing opinions. I tend to keep it, but some others say the math indicates that you shouldn't. and that's something that I'm definitely going to put some more thought and time into.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about Developer Brain. I remember when I was playing Red Blue in the beginning of set 3, I had this notion of like Developer Brain is a trash card. Like I hate this card. I hate playing Developer Brain on turn 1. It doesn't do anything for you on turn 1. You're just
It finds one jump ahead.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
the key.
yeah. And then I wasn't
If you don't
playing.
have it.
I wasn't playing one jump then. I was 902 steps
Mhm.
behind, as I like to say. But so you're trying to mulligan into like your important cards, one jump. You want to keep Flavor Sham and stuff. What would you? Any advice in terms of mulliganing in general? Like my general stuff is like stay away from the high cards. Obviously, in a deck that has so many uninkables, I do this sometimes if I have like a hand of like Maleficent Dragon, a Tamatoa, I'll keep it still just in case because I have extra ink, so I don't just mulligan into a bunch of uninkables. Like any tips when playing red blue for that?
Yeah, red blue does have a high uninkable count, so it is something that you have to consider. I think the majority of the uninkable cards that aren't one jump ahead are going to be almost an always mulligan situation.
Mm-hmm.
The only other card I'd consider keeping that's uninkable is a How Far I'll Go. And once again, it's sort of matchup dependent. You do have an advantage if you know what your opponent's playing and can kind of configure your mulligan that way. But even if you're playing against, some newer players might think, okay, Be Prepared is very good against decks with lots of characters. So if I see a Be Prepared and I know I'm playing against a deck with a lot of characters, maybe I want to keep that. But the problem with that is you want to make sure that you're hitting your ink every single turn, and you want to set up situations to where when you draw the Be Prepared on turn 3 or turn 4 of the game, you can then cast it when you need it. The problem you'll run into if you keep too many uninkables in your hand is you won't get to the point where you'll be able to cast that Be Prepared. You'll get stuck at maybe 5 or 6 ink. So that's something to consider. I think just as a general heuristic for me, I think all uninkables are being sent back and hoping to draw some inkables earlier in the game.
Okay. With the exception of I imagine one jump ahead every now and then.
One jump ahead and maybe How Far I'll Go, or the one jump ahead is the surefire exception, and then you have to consider some other things.
What about ice block? Do you keep an ice block on turn 1 if you don't have an item, or are you just like, you know what, we're looking for the popsicle?
Yeah, I think you got to dig for the popsicle. The ice block is a little underwhelming
Okay.
at the start of the game.
Interesting. See, I've been playing the deck wrong. That's how you know I've been playing the deck wrong, and that's why I don't play a deck like red blue.
And I want to preface this by saying I could be wrong.
Yeah. No, of course.
Anything I'm saying is obviously just an opinion, and I think that's one thing that you want to welcome, regardless of your skill level, is be open to other opinions. Because I don't care how much success I had this weekend. I think anyone who had success at Chicago, that's way more impressive to me. I think that's a much tougher tournament. But yeah, definitely, if you see other people having success, and even others that aren't having success, I will say my roommate, anyone familiar with the competitive Magic scene, may be familiar with the name Joe Lissette. He is a very good competitive Magic player. He hasn't played a lot of Lorcana, but he understands the fundamentals and the basics of the game. We did play one team tournament together. Gave him a little tutorial for a week. We played the team tournament. We made the finals. It worked out well. But the point is, he's watched some of my games just kind of over my shoulder on Pixelborn, and he's like, "So why'd you do this?" And then I have my reason, but he questions it, and he might not have the reps that I do, but he can at least see, and he's made me question some things that I thought were, 100% the right play or whatever. You want to listen to outsiders if given the opportunity. Obviously you want to respect their opinion, but I think that's one good thing to do, regardless of your skill level. Don't be too cocky in that you're the quote unquote expert. I think a lot of people will fall into traps that way.
Mhm. I like that. I like
Yeah.
the falling into traps part. That's very important.
I think it's important, not necessarily to be cocky, but to be confident, because the point of playing the game can be very, you can give off a lot of confidence, and that alone can actually play a game on its own. Some people even say the game starts before cards are even played. Sometimes you're talking to somebody, and there can be, they can give off a certain aesthetic that may be a little intimidating. Has any of this ever like came up? Has anyone ever told you that they're scared to play against you at all, Shane?
So I'll be honest, in my Magic career, that wasn't much of a thing. But in my brief Lorcana career, that is becoming sort of a thing locally. I did. So I played in three store championships. I top eighted two of them, and I O2 dropped one of them. Like you're not going to win every tournament, regardless of what the skill levels of your opponents are. But in the tournament I O2 dropped, I remember I played against a local player who I played a few times in round one of that tournament. And in a previous store championship, we had played and I had won, and we basically both knew we were on the same deck. So he basically mentioned that he was a little disappointed to get paired against me. And I remember telling him like, if you want to do well, you're gonna have to beat good players. Uh, and he beat me, and guess what? He won the tournament. So if you're gonna have success over time, you're gonna end up playing better players more consistently. So uh, I think it's a little silly for anyone to be intimidated by me, quite frankly. But I have experienced some of that whereas I'm not used to it, at least not yet. But locally, that's been a thing. I don't think anyone outside of this area is particularly scared of me.
Not yet, man. Give it a couple more challenges, and you're gonna be there, man. Trust me. This guy definitely knows what he's talking about. He's being humble. But
One thing I want to mention is you mentioned, sometimes if you get in your head that like this player is better than me, you will play worse because you're not focused on the game at hand. And I actually played, rest in peace Pixelborn. I played in an online tournament last night. Halfway through the tournament, I played the Rat. He just won Chicago. It's a two-game format. We split the games. I can't be too disappointed in that. But the game I lost, I had some errors, and there were errors that, I mean, one of the errors in particular, I don't think I make particularly often. It was just a careless mistake, and you can get in your head sometimes if you're like, oh, okay, this guy's really good. I need to really stay focused, but that can almost have a counter effect, at least in my experience. I know I've had some experience with Magic where I've gone to my head too much, and one mistake leads to a domino effect, and next thing I know, I'm just making mistakes that don't make any sense. Like I know better. Like you can look at the game afterwards and like never do this because it doesn't make any sense, but in the moment I did it. So something else is going on in your brain chemistry and affecting your decision making skills in that moment.
yeah, that's definitely happened to me. I feel like for like other games in the past, I used to get like really nervous, and same thing, it makes an impact on your decision making skills. And I think with a lot of practice, that kind of does kind of calm down, and that's even practice of like repetition of like being in tournaments. Like I've gone to so many tournaments where like I'm used to this top cut experience or something, or even just I played so many reps where I'm used to it. But it is hard to shake off of those nerves, man. It really is. Do you have any tips in like shaking off?
Absolutely.
Do you have any tips in shaking off those top cut, even if it's something as small as locals? Because I know some players who are very much like they get nervous when they're about to play a top cut of their locals. Set championships coming around again, and some people really want to win those Ursulas. So
Yeah, I mean, set championships is high stakes. I mean, those stitches are worth a chunk of change, and especially when you get into that top eight, you can have a perfect Swiss record, but ultimately it's going to come down to that top eight match. So I think just breathing, focusing on the task at hand, taking it one step at a time, really. Don't like I know some people, you win round one and you're like, okay, I need to win three more rounds and then I can draw and then I'm at top eight and then I gotta win. Like just win one round at a time. And I think especially in the two-game format, just look at it. I know there's a lot of talk about, whether two-game format is good or bad, and I have mixed feelings about it, but I think there are some positives. Um, and there's a lot of talk of the scoring system with the two-game format. I think just look at it is win as many games as possible and just play one game at a time. And I think that's the best you can do. You're going to be an even playing field. I think eliminating the dice roll effectively in the two-game format is a positive. change. I know some people think there's a level of importance to the dice roll still. I don't. I think it almost completely eliminates the importance of the die roll in the 2-game form. There's the second game tiebreaker, but I think that's very, very rarely going to be relevant, to be frank. So just take it one game at a time. I have an issue where I'm pretty bad at like making eye contact with people. So I tend to just focus on the board. Like I will look down and stare at the board pretty much the entire time. Maybe I'm losing edges there because I can't pick up on facial expressions or something of that nature. But I think it just allows me to kind of focus at the task at hand. Generally there's going to be matches playing next to you. Try not to be too nosy on what's going on over there. Just focus on what's going on in front of you and what you can control. And if you get nervous, and I have, just try and take a few deep breaths. If you have some water or something available, utilize that. Remember, the judges are there, to help you. If you go to the bathroom and you're in a high stakes match, pause the match, say you need to step away for a moment. I'm not saying do this because you're nervous and you need to catch your breath and to take a moment, but if it's distracting enough and you need to use the restroom for whatever reason, like do that. Like don't think you need to wait. Maybe it's different in other games, I don't know, but in Magic that's common. You can request a judge to get a bathroom break.
I'm had to go use the bathroom in between my top 32 games. Like right before my game 3, I was like, bro, I really gotta go use the bathroom. And like I looked at my opponent, the judge, and I was like, okay, please, for the love of God, it's okay. And they were like, yeah. So yeah, exactly what you're saying. I felt like I was a lot more clear minded just because of that. But okay, cool, man. Thanks for reassuring those tips, man. I feel like those are some things I do. I also learned a couple more things I could probably do in those scenarios. I know playing for high stakes can be a little nerve wracking. I do just want to go back a little bit, backtrack a little bit to your deck choice. You were playing red blue at these 3 tournaments. You used to play green steel last format. People were talking about how green steel is like the best deck this format. Why didn't you just play the same deck this format going into these tournaments? Like, and then with that being said, how do you normally pick a deck for tournaments or for the format?
Sure, it's funny you mention that because I've had a couple people mention like, oh, why not green steel? And really, that 1K that you mentioned that we all top aided, that was really the only event I ever played green steel. And that was a meta call. Like, how do you pick a deck? Well, at that moment, I don't remember exactly what sets were legal. I think it might have just been the first 2.
Yeah, for those flood
Uh,
break.
in that in that moment, Ruby Amethyst was dominant. And I think anyone in the room knew that it was likely going to be the most popular deck. And I thought at that moment in time, Green Steel was the natural counter to Ruby Amethyst. And I did play Ruby Amethyst a few times in that event. I won those matches. I had to beat some other decks, of course. But that was basically just a meta game choice. So, whenever you're making a decision on what deck to bring, if you don't want to play the most popular deck, well, how about you play the deck that beats the most popular deck? And in that situation, that's what I chose. My history with Blue Red is pretty lengthy, actually, or I guess Ruby Sapphire, we should say, um, because I mentioned that team event that I played with my roommate and a friend of ours. The team event structure in Lorcana, for anyone who's unfamiliar, this was a 3-person team on each side, and all 6 ink colors need to be represented. So it does lead to some unique deck building decisions. And in that case, we were trying to navigate, all the different color combinations that you could play. And this tournament as well was also just the first two sets. And blue red was not a particularly good, but I think the circumstances of that tournament, I decided that it was worth playing. And I think one of the very first big online Pixelborn tournaments, I played blue red in that, knowing very well that it wasn't a good choice under normal circumstances. But I just wanted to get the practice of playing it. And even though I didn't finish in the top cut of that event, I think I might have finished top 16. I'm not sure. I think the cut might have been just top 8.
Mm-hmm.
I took solace in the fact that I looked at all the results and all the deck lists, That was at a time where blue was not a very popular color at all, and I was the best finishing player with blue in my deck. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna play this in the team tournament. My history with that color combination goes all the way back to then. I played it in bits and pieces since then. Actually, the store championships, I told you I played in three. I played Ruby Amethyst in all three of those, and that was with the first three sets legal. So I've kind of bounced around a little, despite I have heard a couple of people say, "Oh, you're the green steel guy," and that honestly never made much sense to me, just because it's basically that one event. But I guess it depends on what your experience with seeing me play is. So,
You,
but
you,
yeah, I've played blue red a little bit more.
you gave people PTSD with green steel, dude. That's why. That was like at a time too where a lot of people weren't playing it. Like it was like Ruby Amethyst dominant, and it's like, oh dang, just
That's
getting.
why I chose it. Exactly
Yeah,
that.
yeah, okay, yeah, man. It's good to know. It's good to know. Well, I'm glad that you saw success with Ruby Sapphire. I'm looking at your deck list. You're saying you got inspiration from other deck lists you saw online, which is very important. I feel like a lot of us do that, and then you're able to kind of go from there. So really awesome to see, man. Zach, do you have any questions you want to lead off on?
I mean, just I kind of like little want to mention this too. In that tournament, you played Green Steel, and I actually pivoted from Green Steel to Amber Steel, and it was a deck that I copied. It was when Zephyr uploaded a video, and it was about with the deck with Gaston, the Singer 5, the new one at the time. So yeah, I definitely agree that as long as you kind of understand why people are playing the cards they're playing, it's very important to like identify that. Shane, we are playing a Disney card game. Do you have any favorite Disney movies at all that you'd like to talk about?
If there's one thing that's become apparent when I started playing Lorcana is maybe I'm not as big of a Disney fan as I thought I was, because there were so many cards when I started playing, like I didn't know what they were from. I don't have any children, so there's a gap in my knowledge, essentially. Obviously, I was a big Disney fan as a child, as most people are, and I love a lot of the more recent Pixar movies. But there were still several that I had missed over time. I think so. I'm a pretty big movie enthusiast as a whole, and I love going to the movie theater. I know most people like streaming services and things of that nature these days, but I'm fortunate enough I live walking distance from a movie theater. I'm there all the time. But I think the first movie I ever saw in a theater was The Little Mermaid. So definitely a fan of that one. And then as I got a little older, I think Aladdin is my favorite Disney movie. One jump ahead in my deck. I think that works out perfectly. Uh, Big Lion King fan as well. So kind of that early to mid '90s into like Toy Story. Definitely a fan of some of those movies. But Lorcana has led me to watching some of the movies I wasn't familiar with. Like I'm playing Flaversham in my deck, and I said to myself, what is this from? And I went, even though it's in my time period, I had to go back and watch Great Mouse Detective, and that was a good one, a very enjoyable movie. And then I watched Encanto for the first time ever the day of the release of Earl's Return, and I'm like, there's all these Madrigal cards, like I got to see what all the fuss is about. And that's another good movie. So it's definitely led me to watching more Disney movies recently than maybe I was in recent history.
Nice. Love to
Wow.
hear it, man. No, yeah, I feel like I'm kind of a like not like the biggest Disney fan. I like movies though. I like going to the movie theater. So I did appreciate like keeping up with the Disney movies. But same thing. There's a lot of characters that I would play, and I'd be like, who the heck is Kick Cloud Kicker? Like things like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I do like I watched the Raya and the Last Dragon because of the fact that it was coming out in England, and I was like, and I wanted to know who Sisu was, or I think it was coming out in Floodborne, and I really wanted to know who
yeah, I
Sisu
still
was.
need to watch that one, and Sisu came up big for me this weekend,
There you
so
go.
I need to catch up.
You gotta pay respects, man. You gotta pay respects to the Sisu. It's a good movie, man. I'm pretty sure a lot of Lorcana players are starting to watch old Disney movies, man. Is there any like Disney movies, Disney characters that you want to see in the future of Lorcana, maybe put into the game?
That's a great question. I think I would like to see some of the Pixar characters. Like if there was a Wall-E card, I'd probably love that. Or maybe
Ooh.
some of the Toy Story characters, or characters from Up. Like those are some of my favorite movies that have come out in the last decade plus. So we'll see if they go the Pixar route at all. I imagine we'll probably see it. I mean, we're already getting some Disney afternoon cartoon things. Maybe some Darkwing Duck cards would be cool. I mean, it's Disney. There's so much to choose from. I don't think they're going to run out of characters to introduce anytime soon.
Oh no, especially now that they're going through like cartoon shows too. 'Cause I do believe a lot of the
Yeah.
DuckTales characters and stuff like that, or some of the other characters we have are from like actual cartoon shows. So they have a lot of in their arsenal in terms of like IP of what they can like choose from. So that's always nice and safe to see. I'm personally looking for a Big Hero 6 IP in the future. But I'm pretty sure they're gonna keep expanding more on the current ones they have and whatnot. But yeah, man, thanks for taking the time to tell us a little bit about your experience with Lorcana, your overall TCG experience, and some tips on how to play the game and just how to be a little better. I'm pretty sure a lot of people appreciate it. I appreciate it. I want to always be better at the game. Zach, do you have anything to add?
Definitely. One more thing. We did it in the last episode. So you said you'd like to see Wally. You said you'd like to see Wally. So I really wanted
Yeah.
to kind of pick your brain. What would this Wally character do? What would his stats be? Just kind of create a card for us.
Ooh, really being put on the spot there. Clearly we have a character card, right? Uh, it's going to be inkable because it's got to be a good card. I mean, I don't. I mean, that's not to say there's plenty of good uninkable cards, but you want it to be a little flexible. I don't know. Maybe there's an Eva card also, right? And
Hmm.
when Wally comes into play, maybe you draw a card, but if it comes into play and Eva is also in play, you draw 3 cards, and
Ooh.
then you can get some synergy with those two because Wally loves Eva, so he needs to reward the player for reuniting them.
Having all the board together. That's right. That's definitely.
Is this going to be a steel card or an amber card?
Feels too good right now. I think we need to spread the love a little bit. I think
Before
Steel has all the tools for everything.
Before we call
Um,
it, actually, I do want to get your opinion on the general state of Lorcana. Like, do you think we're in a good meta space? I love the Inklands format, the Atlanta format as we're talking about. How do you feel about the current Ursula's Return format? What do you expect for the future of Lorcana, and like what should we expect from like the competitive scene?
I think there's a slight downgrade going from set 3 to set 4. I think a little more things were viable overall in that set 3 format. That's not to say set 4 is that format. I think there's 4 very legitimate decks right now, and realistically, it could be maybe 5. I think green purple or amethyst is a little underrepresented based on the strength of the deck. I know I will say this, as a Ruby Sapphire player, I don't particularly want to play against that deck. So if you're going to your locals and you're trying to beat Ruby Sapphire, maybe pick that deck up or pick up the more aggressive versions of Ruby Amethyst. If you go, 1 drop into Flynn, into 3 drop into Castle, Blue Red is going to have a very hard time. A lot of people consider Blue Red to be the best deck in the format right now. But I will say it has, some shortcomings, and there's some things that can beat it. But I think overall the meta's pretty. I know a lot of people have opinions on Bucky. I think it's a very good card, and I think it's okay for very good cards to exist. I think there are play patterns that maybe aren't the most pleasant, but thing that I think is a good thing to see is we've seen a card like Triton's Decree, right? I think that's the one uninkable deal 2 damage to a card of your opponent's choice, right? And when I read that initially, I didn't realize, of course, sometimes they're only going to have a ward character. In that case, it's gonna take out the Bucky. So I think the design team, and credit to them, they've done a great job. We have a pretty limited card pool, but there are choices to be made in your deck building. Like, do we see an increase in Triton's Decree? Probably not. I'm not sure it's quite the answer to Bucky, but at least it's something to consider. So if you're having a lot of time at your locals against Bucky, the problem is if they play turn 1 Diablo, it just kills that. So it's not perfect by any means, but nonetheless, it's interesting to think that the designers are kind of making ways to beat or have some sort of answer to ward characters. But I think overall the meta's pretty healthy. But that probably depends on who you ask. If it's the player that's sick of losing to Bucky, they may have a different answer. I played against a lot of Buckies this weekend, and I had a lot of success against them. So I'm not too scared to play against that card. I personally don't think banning a card at this current state be in consideration. I think in the top 4 of Chicago, we saw 4 different deck archetypes, and those might be the top 4 decks, overall in the metagame right now. But 4 decks is not a small number, in my opinion. I do come from Magic, where there has been 6 months time periods where every tournament was dominated by a 2 deck metagame. So I think 4 decks generally is not terrible, but I think in set 3 we did see a little more variety, and I don't think that's a bad thing either.
Sick, man. I'm really excited for the future of Lorcana, the future of the metagame. I honestly feel the same thing in terms of how much there is to play. How many different playable decks there are this format. There's a lot more diversity than I think we give credit for. And to kind of touch on the design aspect of the game, they also gave us Avalanche. I love Avalanche and Sapphire Steel. That's
true.
Another, So yeah, the designers do take that into consideration. But we are going to wrap it up. We do have to wrap it up today. Thanks again, Shane Downey. Do you have any shout outs you want to give out before we call it a day on this episode of Quest with a Guest?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Just as far as shoutouts, I've met a lot of people locally. Each of you, included, Bill Vuong is a guy who is an excellent organizer in the Southern California area. He has a spreadsheet that if you're ever in a Facebook group or a Discord group, you're probably gonna find it. But he puts a lot of time and effort into that, and I think I just want to sing his praise a moment, because I think he's helping foster that local community, and he's been judging a lot of local events as well, and putting some time and effort into that. He's got a baby on the way, so if by the time he sees this, congratulations. I know it's coming very, very soon. So I just want to give a shout out to him, and then all the people I've met locally. If we play, whether it's at locals or a sword championship, or maybe we travel for an event and just happen to run into each other, don't hesitate to say hello. And if you're intimidated by me, all I have to do is ask why. I'm just a guy. I make mistakes all the time, and we're just playing a game at the end of the day.
Awesome, man. If you want to follow Shane, you can find him in Southern California at some locals and some big tournaments, also in the Magic scene, so be sure to look out for him. Zach, do you have any final words before we go?
Shane, since you and I have gotten to more know each other, one of Kevin's cousin Chris, you've instilled the fear into him, and so I just kind of want to thank you for that. Someone that he can kind of look forward to always wanting to beat. But I just also want the viewers to know, someone with the fear instilled to them was able to take down the Shane Downey in a top 8 of a set champs, and you guys can do it too. So never be intimidated, guys. So thank you guys for watching this episode of Quest with the Guest. You can always lore for more here at Lorcana Goons. So thank you again.
Yeah, man, I'm pretty sure a lot of viewers have a Shane Downey at their locals. They know that top guy that's consistently, winning, or you know what I mean. But the same thing. Don't be intimidated by them. Don't be intimidated by him. Ask them for advice. I tell people all the time: be willing to make friends, to gain information, to give out information. I really appreciate the time they've given us, Shane, for then giving us your outlook on TCGs, especially the part about learning from people who may not necessarily have the credentials or the experience. Comparing it to Magic the Gathering, expressing how your roommate is a very prominent Magic the Gathering player, but they're still able to give you Lorcana advice. Even winning, splitting the finals in that tournament, like you were talking about, that 3v3, and I did hear about that tournament. So that's really cool. I didn't know that your friend who doesn't even play Lorcana basically won that tournament with you.
I will say there's another one coming up in about 2 weeks. We're gonna try and do it again. So we'll see.
We'll see you there. We're gonna have to see you in the finals. Team Goons against Team Shane Downey.
Perfect.
So what's your team name?
Super Chuckers. Look out for us.
Okay. Awesome, man. Well, it was a pleasure, man. I really appreciate you. And once again, stay tuned to Lorcana Goons. If you like this content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, guys. It does support the channel. We'll see you Goons next time.